Hello friends, welcome back to Literary Cleveland's YouTube channel. My name is Naomi and I am one of Literary Cleveland's spring interns. So for my internship project, I proposed a video series idea. So this is the first video in that video series. You can expect videos every Thursday all the way up until April 7th. So for this first video, I wanted to recommend a couple of books that people can prioritize reading during Women's History Month. So all of these books are written by women with female leads, which obviously makes them perfect to read during Women's History Month. So some of these recommendations come from myself, others come from the Literary Cleveland staff, and I also went over to our Instagram, Literary Cleveland. If you haven't followed us, go do that. But I went over to our Instagram stories and asked for all of you to give us recommendations, so some of those recommendations are also in this video. So for the first recommendation, we have Hunger by Roxane Gay. This one actually came from our Instagram, so I personally haven't read this book, but I've heard a lot about it. So I've actually heard a little bit about Roxane Gay and when she used to write personal essays on her Tumblr. I still haven't gotten to this book, but I should prioritize it this month in March. So from what I know that this book is basically a collection of personal essays by Roxane that touch a lot about feminism and women's bodies and rape culture. I have heard that this book is beautifully written and that Roxane Gay takes a lot of her personal experiences and writes about all of those, which makes this novel just so intimate and real. So I will definitely be checking this book out in the month of March for Women's History Month. The second recommendation that I have is Degrading Alone by Kristen Hanna, and this one is actually one of my personal favorites. So I read this last year in 2021 and it became one of my favorite books of the year. So this one is a historical fiction novel and it basically follows this family. I believe they're the Albrights. I got that right, the Albrights. So this is set in 1974 and basically this man, his name's Ernst Albright, and he just came back from the Vietnam War. He's obviously a completely changed man. He obviously feels like nobody really understands what he went through. So one day after he came back from the war, he makes the impulsive decision to take his whole family, his wife and daughter, to Alaska. And like I said, this book is set in 1974, which basically means that in Alaska everything is completely off the grid, which means that they have to hunt and there's no electricity at all, and they have to hunt for their food, and they can't really make any mistakes because those mistakes will cost their lives. So the Albright family moves to this small independent community, and as winter approaches and dark descends, Ernst Albright's mental state deteriorates. And one of the things that I love about this book the most is that it's set over many years, so you really see the growth of the wife and the daughter, all of the growth that they have during this novel. And this is just a really beautiful book, and it has some of my favorite female characters. The next recommendation that I have is a personal favorite, and that is Peluda by Melissa Lozada Oliva, and this one is a poetry collection. It is super short. You could probably finish this in about an hour. So in this novel, Melissa writes a lot about the trauma of being a brown woman in America. She speaks a lot about womanhood and the relationship of women with their body hair. I thought that this poetry collection talked a lot about identity, and it was beautifully written and also very funny and smart, and is just a great overall poetry collection. The next recommendation that I have is a young adult book, and that is The Gracier by Kim Leggett, and this one is a dystopian novel. So this book has actually been compared to a mix of The Hunger Games and The Handmaid's Tale. So this one follows a small community called Garner County, and basically in this community, women are told that when they're 16 years old and when they're approaching womanhood, they have powers. So basically these young 16-year-old girls go through this ritual, and they are basically first paired off with a man, and they're told that they have to marry this man, and then they are banished into the woods when they turn 16 years old for a whole year. And obviously not a lot of these girls survive the whole year out there in the woods, so This book follows one of our young girls. She is turning 16 and she's going through this ritual and she's questioning all of these things that this community has done for many, many years. And I adored this book. This is a very addictive read. I feel like you have to know what's happening next. So I read this really, really quickly and I adored this book. This book is obviously very feminist and it talks a lot about survival and freedom, and I think that you should definitely read this. The next recommendation is written by one of my all-time favorite authors, and that is With the Fire on High by Elizabeth Acevedo. This is another young adult coming-of-age story. So this one follows Emoni Santiago. I believe she's Puerto Rican or Dominican. I don't remember from the top of my head right now. So Emoni is a senior in high school and she's about to graduate. She's going through all of those trials and turmoils of high school, and she's also a single mother, and one of her biggest dreams is to become a chef. But obviously, being a single mother, there's a lot of struggles there, and she wants to follow her dreams and aspirations, but obviously being a single mother obviously doesn't make things as easy. I think that this book was beautifully written. Obviously, I can see myself a lot in Emoni because I am also Hispanic, and I just thought it was beautiful to be able to relate to a character so much. The next recommendation that I have is The Mothers by Britt Bennett. I personally have not read this book. This book came as a recommendation from the Literary Cleveland staff. I have read The Vanish in Half by Britt Bennett and I really, really enjoyed that book, so I definitely want to give this one a try. So this book basically follows this young woman. Her name is Nadia, and Nadia left her hometown of Southern California many, many years ago when her mother committed suicide, and then she is called back to come back home many, many years later when she's an adult. I did want to read a passage in the description because I feel like it just describes a lot better the feel of this book. So basically in here it says that The Mothers is a book about community and ambition, love and friendship, and living up to expectation in contemporary Black America. So I'm really excited to prioritize this book during this month in Women's History Month and read it sometime soon. The next recommendation that I have also came from the Literary Cleveland staff, and that is The Chosen One by Echo Brown. This book follows our main character, Echo, who just graduated as a valedictorian in Cleveland, Ohio, and then she gets into Dartmouth College. And this book follows the disappointments and triumphs as a Black first-generation college student. Also, being a first-generation college student, I feel like I'm going to relate to this book a lot, and I can't wait to read it. The next recommendation that I have is The Power by Naomi Alderman, and this recommendation also came from the Literary Cleveland staff. So this one is a science fiction novel that basically follows this future where women begin to develop the ability to release electrical energy through their fingers, which then in this world, because they have those abilities, they become the dominant sex. I personally haven't read this book, but I've heard great things about it, and I feel like it's going to have really important conversations about sexism and feminism, and I'm excited to read it. The next recommendation that I have is The Ladies Gallery by Irene Villar. And this recommendation also came from our Instagram. So Irene Villar is the granddaughter of Lolita Lebron, who was a martyr for Puerto Rican independence. In this memoir, Irene revisits the legacy of her grandmother. And on the description, it says that this memoir is alternating between Villar's notes from the psychiatric ward and the unraveling of her family's secrets. This razor-sharp memoir of 3 generations of Puerto Rican women is urgent, impassioned, and unforgettable. The last recommendation that I have is a thriller paranormal fiction, and that is Ninth House by Leigh Bardugo. This one is another one of my personal favorites, and in my opinion, this one has one of the strongest, most dynamic female characters that I've ever read. So this book follows our main character, Alex Stern, and she is the sole survivor of a multiple homicide, and one day, by her hospital bedside, she is offered the opportunity to go on a full ride to Yale University. She is obviously super confused because she doesn't really qualify to be in Yale, but then she discovers that she's being asked to monitor the activities of Yale secret societies. There are 8 very powerful societies that deal with very sinister activities, and the only reason why she is qualified to be able to monitor these activities is because she can see dead people. This book is super dark, but it has one of the most real female characters that I've ever read in any book. So I love this book, and this is going to become a series, so I'm really excited to read more about Alex Stern. So those were all of our recommendations of books that we think that you should be reading during Women's History Month. And like I said, this will be a video series, so expect a video every Thursday all the way up until April 7th. Subscribe to our YouTube channel if you haven't yet, and we will see you next time. Bye!